Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Financial Advisors Want to Know podcast. I'm Catherine Tindall, a CPA here at Dominion Enterprise Services. We're a specialty tax and accounting firm that just works for financial advisors. And today's episode, I have Scott Rusnak. He is an executive coach, expert EOS implementer, and board certified coach for the US and British Olympic teams. He also works for several advisor firms as an EOS implementer. He's the author of the Entrepreneurial Field Guide. He's co-founded and successfully exited multiple businesses, including Schoollogic, GolfNow, HM Systems, and Tutela. Each successful transition has been attributed to the tools within the EOS framework. With more than 30 years of experience in the entrepreneurial world as a coach, consultant, and advisor, he helps his clients recognize blind spots and learn lessons that can only be taught by someone who has been through it all. Scott, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
Wow, that's a lot.
Well, you've done a lot. And that's what the EOS system allows you to do, right? Allows you to go in hyperspeed.
Yeah, you just have to compartmentalize things and really realize what your vision is. What does that thing look like? Are we ready to run with discipline and accountability? And then most importantly, do you want to do it in a healthy, open, honest environment so everyone knows how we're going to get there?
Exactly. Yeah, because I was having this conversation even with an advisor earlier today where she's getting into the place in her business now where she's doing, top line $1 million a year. She wants to grow, but there's all of the underlying structure work hasn't been done because she's been able to survive off of solopreneur, wearing every hat, running as fast as she can. And now that she's getting to the point of, I really want to turn this into a business that I can sell. And, a business that's good to sell is a business that's good to own, and really getting some of these frameworks and systems in place so that it can be a more scalable operation. I've seen it be, life-changing for advisors who have been able to implement it. So for people who aren't familiar, which, you have to be kind of living under a rock if you haven't heard of the book Traction before, but what would you say is kind of the first places to start in terms of knowing when it's time to bring in a system like this, what kind of mental resources you need to, allocate for this? Like, where do you see people, where's the start point? Like, where's the purchase point for people that you've been seeing in the financial services industry?
Yeah, good question. You're ready to start if all of your people are not aligned, not only on your vision, but they're not aligned on your values, the value system you've got for yourself and in your business. And if those people aren't aligned there and they're not ready to be measured each and every day, every week, every quarter, you probably need a little bit of help.
And so for people that are, you're running your practice, you've got a handful of employees, you're starting to feel like the wheels are coming off. What's the first step? Do you tell people, just jump right in, read the book, try to DIY? Like, where do you tell people to start?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about EOS and Traction, and Gino's been a fantastic business partner. It's crazy that two guys that could barely get out of high school could help thousands of entrepreneurs. So that part is pretty cool. And I'm just going to back it up a little bit. I've got a client in San Diego called West Coast Wealth, a very young team of 20 somethings and 140 something that just said, hey, look, we've read the book. We've implemented some of these ideas. We've got an accountability chart. I think we're pretty sure on our quarterly priorities, and they were doing a good job. They were probably about 70% of the way there. But we all know that it's that next phase that's the hardest part. So I came in and I stuck a flashlight in some of the corners and the nooks and crannies. And I said, look, are you really running this thing purely? So we got really straight on their VTO, being their values, what's their core focus, what's their purpose, where they want to be in 10 years, 3 years, one, and what are their rocks. And that stuff for financial advisors is simple. Of course, we can figure that out. But it's watching the bodies in the room, seeing the behaviors that fall into place. That's where a coach can come in. And I'm not asking you to be hired from this podcast. I'm just saying, don't be afraid to bring in a who to get you to where you want to be. And Dan Sullivan calls that who, not how. We can figure out what the how looks like. Who's going to help you get there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for people, if it's their first rodeo scaling a practice, and also some of those, because, even myself as a business owner, it can be a challenge where you kind of have this, okay, well, this is how we were doing things. We try to implement this. And maybe there's some really hard conversations that need to happen, but you don't want to be the one that's instigating it. So by having an external person in the room, it allows you to have somebody else instigate it. It's not that you're going to avoid that conversation, but at least it kind of forces the issue rather than you just, like you were saying, maybe you can get 70% of the way there, but the difference between good and great is, magnitudes of difference. So I think that's a great thing to highlight. So when you've come into practices, what are common things that you see people screw up when trying to do self-implementations that are, kind of either low-hanging fruit or just really common things that you see people mess up trying to DIY?
I'll talk about two clients, and I'm sure that they would answer to this as well. One would be Rob Chatterton of Chatterton Associates in Anaheim, and the other one would be Matthew Jarvis, who is a partner in the Perfect RIA. And they both are really smart leaders. But the bottom line is they needed their team to get vulnerable and realize we're not perfect. And some things may not look like they should. So we've got to instill the cadence. And as the coach, I'm going to inspect that cadence every week and every quarter to make sure you're getting there. So I go to Allen Iverson, who said, practice. Hey, look, I want you to practice. I need you to put these reps in to become a world-class team. And I've yet to see any Olympic team or any other team get there without a really great coach. Again, I'm not on this podcast to try to get hired. I just want people to be introspective and understand that you've got to get vulnerable and have someone else come in and point out those blind spots.
Yeah, because if you're the only person monitoring your growth, you're only going to grow to how big you are, right? Like you can't be pulled beyond yourself by yourself. It's got to come from some, that internal drive has to come from you, but the expertise to actually get you to get beyond, the ceiling of yourself, it requires something external to pull you up.
Ooh, you just said something there sorry, Catherine. You said something that really resonates. Get beyond yourself. So I firmly believe, and I do a talk every quarter all over the globe for EOS called EOS Life. I firmly believe if you want a well-designed business, you've got to have a well-designed life. And a lot of the advisors and people are watching this right now are going, I'm making money. I think I'm doing pretty good. But there's so much more to it that you can bring in if you're in sync on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I've heard from other, a piece of content that I really like is that, in your business, you are going to be the ceiling, right? If you're the one that's the firm owner, the constant issues that you're coming up against, it's going to be yourself. That's who the problem is going to be coming from. And you need to be able to figure out that balance between personal and business, because ultimately, like, it's my opinion that, business is a means for self-actualization, and that it's a challenge for you to become a better version of yourself. And that's really the core challenge of it, rather than just like, oh, I'm going to make some money. That's kind of, you're going to tap out at a pretty low level if that's kind of your attitude with it. But what I really like about what I've, because EOS is something that we're working on implementing in our firm, and it's an interesting learning curve. And we utilize like a lot of software and things for tracking internally. A lot of it's, specific for my industry, but a lot of it comes down to those mental pieces and that willingness to improve, and a lot of those kind of like soft points, not things that are as easily measured. For people who are trying to, maybe they've read the book, trying to do some initial implementations, where have you found kind of the easiest wins for people in the process of implementing?
Yeah, the easiest wins happen right out of the gate in what we call Focus Day, where we get your organization really built up on something we call the accountability chart. Who's the visionary? Who's guiding us in the right direction? Who's pulling this together? Who's our integrator, our operating officer? And then defining what the seats look like. And then we move on to what their accountabilities have got to be, because if two people are responsible for one thing, nobody's responsible. So we set up that reporting structure, and then we give people in the first 30 days, here's the measurables you've got to hit. And then here's the meeting pulse you're going to have with the level 10 meeting once a week for 60 to 90 minutes to get on the same page. So if they can put that in the right direction, much like a kid riding a bike, they're probably not going to fall off, and they'll end in the right spot till we meet them again in another 30 days.
Nice. That's great. And then so I think for most people, you read the book, you try to implement some things. Kind of when have you seen in terms of like organizational scale size or team, number of team members, or just how aggressive their goals are? When do you think it makes sense to really get some professional help and get off the DIY wagon?
Yeah. When you can't have healthy conflict and solve issues with your team and be aligned, that's when you need help. So that one for sure, the unhealthy conflict, the passive aggressive, oh, we'll get to it later, priority shifting. That's an important stage. Then we talked at the start about systemization. So I'll go to Chatterton and Associates. They've grown 5 times, and it's nothing to do with me. I'm just the coach. They put the work in, but they've grown 5 times since I've started working with them, because they continually go back to those systems and make sure that everyone's operating with discipline and accountability. So they have a fun, loving culture, but there's no hiding. This is how we do things. This is our way. So pretty cool when it comes together.
Yeah. And I guess that's probably a key point for people too, where this isn't a matter of adding more and more complexity. It's about getting onto a system and just doing the basics right? Like it's not, once you have things in place, it's more about the consistency, like that compounding effect of the consistency, rather than you having to take these really, more and more complex measures in order to see growth. So for people what are some results that you've seen people have out in the field in terms of like being able to scale their practices or quality of life improvements, things like that, to kind of, I'm always like trying to entice people. I showed you in the little pre-call, one of the few business books that sits behind my desk is the book.
That's good.
And I think for a lot of people, hearing the transformation stories can be the piece that pushes them over the edge to do it. What successes have you seen kind of maybe recently for wealth management firms that have implemented?
Yeah. So we've got the structure in place. We know what everyone's doing. So it's a foundation of that skyscraper. What do you want it to look like? We got to have the foundation first. And then each little floor on that building that they're putting together, that comes together every week. So we put together the structure. We know how they're measuring one another. And then we keep it really simple. And EOS is the most simple, practical tool set out there. We just put them through these simple processes to learn these 20 tools. And firms much like West Coast Wealth in San Diego, they just get along. They know what's going on. And it's not hugging, kissing all the time, but they push through. And even Matthew Jarvis and his partner Shalansky, these guys are crazy how they push for, but they put the right structure in place and then they have a better life. And people are like, oh, there's no such thing as work-life balance. And I'll say, well, you're dead wrong. Most people are going to be in the same place this time next year. Let's make sure it's not you, because EOS can apply to your business and your life. And that's a big part of the EOS life that we always talk about online.
Yeah, that's great. And that's such a good point of, don't limit this system to just the business. Like use it for your personal life too, because you improving, it's all one thing. Like you can't compartmentalize, like you can't get away from, the things that aren't going right in the business aren't going right on the personal side either. So that's a really great point. So for people that say they've implemented the program, they're starting to see results. What have you seen for, challenges that can be reoccurring that are kind of the hardest to eradicate for people in the system?
People. So you just said it, people. If you don't surround yourself with people who absolutely live and breathe with your core values, if they don't get what you're doing, they don't get their job, if they don't want it, they don't have the capacity, the mental, the emotional, the time, the physical, and the educational capacity, they're not a fit. So you've got to go to that people analyzer tool, get those core values set up, and really make sure that you're surrounding yourself with those folks. So number one is people. I've helped Dutch Bros Coffee. I've helped NATO defense firms, financial firms. I don't care what the product is, what the solution is. We're all in the people business. So that's number one. If we can't get aligned with those human beings, it's never going to work.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess one other challenge that I think a lot of people face is, especially if you're scaling a professional services firm, is, you bring on team members, and then over time, as the organization starts to really accelerate, you have some people that might not be able to keep up with that. And then you run into the issue, which this is something that I think always worries people who are the founders of businesses, is, am I going to get this? I'm always going to be the bottleneck for this business ultimately, because it's going to be my skills as a leader. It's going to be my personal failings. At the end of the day, it's going to rest on me and my own ability. And so for people that are maybe struggling with that, do you have advice in terms of, if you're finding that you want to have certain values, or you want to have a certain standard, but you don't live up to that standard all of the time, or you find like, oh, maybe I'm slowing the team down because of this, that, and the other. What pieces of advice do you have for people that might be in that situation? Because you can fire people that aren't performing, but you can't fire yourself. So like, how do you fix for that?
Well, we'll have some fun here. You can fire yourself, and let's have some fun with it. You can stay in the business. So if you fit the core values and you're the right person in the right seat, you might not have the capacity. So we've got a tool called the Delegate and Elevate Checklist, which was based on Dan Sullivan's teaching, the unique ability, that says, what do I love to do and what am I great at? Well, then we start to look at, what am I not so great at and what do I not love to do? And that's what kills your capacity. For me, I'm not great with details, with taxes. Oh my gosh, financial management, admin, calendar. I've got people that do all of that so I can be at my full capacity as a coach. So people have got to know themselves as they grow the team. And then the team has got to know one another as well. So when we go through this exercise, and I bring it up at every session, let's go to your Delegate and Elevate. I want to make sure you're not doing things that are not in your own unique ability. And with people who fit our core values, they get it, want to have the capacity, and they can know themselves and be vulnerable. That's when we get these streamlined firms that'll say, you know what, Scott should be in this box over here. He's fantastic at this. Let's find someone else to do this one thing. Because if he can just run with this, off we go.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe it's not so much about trying to fix your weaknesses, but offboarding them and just really leaning into your strengths, right? So that's,
well, now, if your weaknesses are you can't tie your shoes in the morning, I'd say, well, get some slip-ons. So,
yeah, it's knowing what battles to fight. That's great. Well, so for people who are looking to connect with you, I know you've got a book out, the Entrepreneur's Field Guide. But for people who are interested in, connecting with you, what are the best ways for them to get in touch or to engage with, the work that you've been doing?
I just took the book off Amazon and we're redoing it on my website. So if they go to my website, scottrusnak.com, there'll be some videos there. They can download those. I'll get them a copy of my book and they can just shoot me an email. I'd be happy to help. One of our core values at EOS is help first. And if I'm not the right fit, I'll help them find someone that can help them better.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Scott. I love this conversation.
Yeah, likewise, Catherine. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.